What's up, guys? Our September Patreon rewards are finally available. If you're interested in picking up a full art Brainstorm or Muldrotha the Gravetide, you can check out all the details at patreon.com/itresolves. What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Crack a Pack series. I hope you all are doing absolutely fantastic today. I'm doing really well, and I'm really excited because we are opening up a pack of Modern Masters, original Modern Masters at that. Obviously, we've had 3 Modern Master sets in total, the first one being by far and away the best, released in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. We did have the 2015 edition, which was subpar, and then the 2017 edition, which, honestly, was kind of good, mostly because of the fetch lands. There were a lot of other great cards in there, don't get me wrong, but the fetch lands is what really drove a lot of that up, as well as a few other cards and things like that. But this, by far and away, in terms of value, is just fantastic. Lots of really great cards in here. Hopefully we get something really valuable out of this one. But of course, we're going to go through this as if it is a draft scenario. So we're going to do the absolute best we can to look at some archetypes and go through every card and figure out what our first round draft pick would be if we were drafting this set. I did not get the chance to first hand draft this. I watched a number of competitive drafts. And I do know some of the archetypes that we're going to be looking at. And the first one here is actually artifacts, and technically affinity, though this has a mechanic called Sunburst, which we'll talk about. So Arkbound Wanderer is a 0/0 for 6 of any color artifact creature with modular Sunburst. So this enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each color of mana that was spent to cast it. So let's break this down a little bit. That's the first part of this mechanic, Sunburst. And so Sunburst really rewards having multiple colors in your deck. It's actually really nice because a lot of times you can end up in quite a number of colors in this set. There's actually just a 5-color like good stuff deck that this kind of fits in. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's a fit-in card. It works fairly well. The second part of this is that modular. So when it dies, you can put its 1/1 counters on another target artifact creature you control, and that's something that we actually see on a few cards as well. Both mechanics are pretty good. Modular, in my opinion, is much stronger than Sunburst in general. Sunburst is something that, in my opinion, is a little bit I don't want to say pigeonholing, but it's like shoving you into a direction of having just a lot of colors. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good, because then your mana tends to be a little bit worse if you're in a lot of colors. And I don't like taking that out of the box like this. There are much more powerful cards for sure, and so this is definitely not a first round draft pick for me. Okay, artifact theme as well. Court Homunculus, 1 white mana for a 1/1, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control another artifact. This is a really solid 1-drop in that deck. It's obviously not amazing in just any white deck or anything like that. You have to have a really high artifact count to make this kind of worth it, but it's still a 2/2 for 1 in the right deck, and that's generally really good. It's not, at most it's a 2/2 for 1, so it's not anything incredible, but it fits very well in that deck, and it is something that you'll want just as some early game action, some board presence, things like that. So I like this card. Again, not a first pick by any means, but definitely good in that artifact deck. Brute Force is an instant for 1 red mana. Target creature gets +3/+3 until the end of the turn. Wow, Kern. This is actually just red giant growth, and red giant growth is great. It's a very good combat trick. Definitely something that you can run if you're in a very aggressive kind of maybe red-white or some kind of strategy where you're really just punching face as much as possible. Not a first pick by any means, because it is just a combat trick, but it is really good for a combat trick. For only 1 mana, you're getting instant speed +3/+3. That's huge. So it's actually quite good. Definitely something that I would run if I was in that deck. Pyrite Spellbomb is an artifact for 1 of any color. You can pay red and sacrifice it, and it actually deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Very, very useful. And then you can also pay 1 of any color, sacrifice it to draw a card. So weirdly, this is the card that I'm most excited about so far because it's shock on an artifact, which artifact you'll want more of anyway. So it's actually kind of good that it's an artifact. Little expensive, but you play this out. Hopefully you can get something like that matters with affinity for artifacts or something along those lines. This helps you get there. Plus it's a removal spell or a card draw spell. And that's actually really, really good. That flexibility is fantastic. If you're in red, you're going to be able to deal 2 damage to something, which is great. So honestly, so far, while this is not by any means a first pickable card, it's definitely not a bad one. And in my opinion, I think it's the best we have so far. Thallid Shell Dweller is a 0/5 for 1 and a green with Defender, so it cannot attack. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a Spore counter on it, and then remove 3 Spore counters from it to put a 1/1 green Sapperling creature token onto the battlefield. This strategy is one that we actually saw originally, I want to say in like Time Spiral or something like that, where you can wait a few turns, build up some counters, and then just start spitting out a bunch of tokens. And it's actually a pretty solid one if you can get to that point. It's a little bit slow, though. There's a lot of really fast synergies. Again, the artifact one is really key in this set. You'll find affinity for artifacts is very, very fast and very powerful. And unfortunately, this tends to get a little bit outpaced, in my opinion. That may not always be true, and honestly, this is one of the cards that helps stop that from happening because it is just a wall. It's going to be able to block very, very early and keep you alive to hopefully get those counters to spit out those 1/1s. But generally speaking, by the time you can do that, your opponent might be playing a little bit more of a powerful threat, and that tends to be a bit of a problem. So as much as I like this card, I don't think that it's a first pick by any means, obviously, but I don't necessarily like the whole strategy behind it in this set as much either. So personal opinion, obviously, and there are some really good payoffs in this one for this strategy, but this is not one of those cards. Dragdown is an instant for 2 and a black. It has domain, so target creature gets -1/-1 until the end of the turn for each basic land type among lands you control. Again, really pushing you into that multicolor strategy. You really want to be in a 3-4 color deck sometimes in this set. And this is actually a really good removal spell. I think better than the Pyrite Spellbomb, in my opinion. You can deal a lot more damage with it, and it's you don't play it out first. It's an instant speed right off the bat. Technically, you can use the Pyrite Spellbomb at instant speed, but you have to play it out on the field first. Which just means your opponent can play around it. So I actually really like Dragdown so far. It's a really good removal spell, and it's definitely the best card in the pack, in my opinion. Sting Scourger is a 2/2 for 1 and a red. It has Echo for 3 and a red. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if this came under your control since the beginning of your last upkeep, you do have to sacrifice it unless you pay that Echo cost. However, when it enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. Really interesting kind of tempo-y card. It's a 2/2 for 2, so already on par. With that effect, you're getting to bounce something. That's actually pretty good. That Echo, not amazing. And it's also really weird that it's 4 mana. My expectation would be 3 mana because, or not, I guess not 3, but maybe 2. Just because it's going to be really hard to pay for that if you play this on turn 2. You're not going to have the lands for it. So it really is just like a bounce spell a lot of times. It doesn't usually stick around for very long unless you're playing it in the late game, in which case it is a tempo swing and it is a 2/2, but a 2/2 in the late game, not amazing. It's an okay card, but Dragdown definitely much better in my opinion. Arkbound Worker is a 0/0 for 1 of any color, and this features that modular mechanic as well. This has modular 1. So when it enters the battlefield, it comes in with a 1/1 counter on it, and then when it dies, you can move that to another target artifact creature, as long as, again, same mechanic we saw in the first card. This is actually just a really solid 1-drop for the artifact deck. It's not an amazing card by any means, but being able to move that counter over can make a difference, especially if you're up like in a mirror match or something like that, and you both end up having roughly the same creatures on board. If one of your Arkbound Workers dies, you're able to put that counter on your strongest creature that now outpowers everything else on the board. So it's actually really, really nice in that regard. But again, not a huge threat by any means, and Dragdown, in my opinion, just so much better. Kodamas Reach is a sorcery arcane spell for 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then you shuffle your library. I actually really like this card because, as we're seeing, a lot of different strategies are pushing you in a lot of different colors. And this helps fix you. You can pick any 2 basic lands, so it doesn't have to be like forests or mountains or excuse me, any one type of basic land. You can pick up anything. And so not only does this thin out your deck, which is always important as well, but it helps you fix your mana. Really, really, truly great card. I think I would rather still have the Dragdown just because it's a little bit more of a powerful card, but this does technically ramp you and fix you, and that's fantastic. I think honestly right now I'm going to keep them together. I think I favor the Dragdown more, but just for consideration's sake, I'm going to keep them together. Faerie Mechanist is a 2/2 for 3 and a blue with flying. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. You put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Again, artifacts are huge, and this is one of the payoff cards. Not huge payoff by any means, but it helps you dig for some bigger threats, some stuff that you may need to deal with the board. Really nice card to have for that, just because it's going to help you dig a little bit. Again, it's not an amazing card because it is just a 2/2 flyer for 4. Not bad. I mean, it is a flyer. It's going to fly through and hopefully deal a little bit of damage, but really that dig is what you're looking for to get to further cards, and that's fantastic. I don't know if it's better than the other 2 cards we have here, honestly. I still kind of lean towards the Dragdown personally, but I don't necessarily think any of these are going to be first picks, so I'm going to pass on this one. Sudden Shock is an instant for 1 and a red with split seconds. So as long as the spell is on the stack, players cannot cast spells or activate abilities that are not mana abilities. What that means, for anybody that might have not dealt with split second before, is essentially it can't be responded to. And what that means for like counter spells and things like that is essentially it cannot be countered. You play this, it goes on the stack, you hold priority or you pass priority, regardless, nobody can then play anything until this spell resolves. And so it just basically means that it's uncounterable, nothing can happen in response to it, and so you know it's going to actually resolve. And honestly, that's pretty big in a lot of situations. That's going to mean, okay, I know that I'll be able to deal this 2 damage in this case, to either a creature or a player without any issues. And that's pretty big, especially unlimited, where you really, really need to manage those resources as best you can. And so I actually really, really like this spell. Possibly, I'm going to go ahead and say I think I like them more than the other 2 cards we have here. I understand Dragdown can do a lot more damage technically. However, this is lucrative in that it hits creatures and players. Plus, it cannot be responded to, and that's such a huge thing, especially if you're up against some kind of control shell or something like that. You'll really, really appreciate having that split second on this. Mind Funeral, very interesting card. So it's a sorcery for 1, a blue, and a black. Target player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until they reveal 4 land cards. That player puts all of the cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard. That's a really powerful effect. So let me just go ahead and point this out. If you're in limited, you're usually running a 40 card deck if you're drafting. And in that case, it's really easy to mill out because there are 20 less cards than you would normally have in constructed. That's a lot of cards that you do not have to mill if you are the mill player, if you're the opponent trying to get somebody to mill out. And this in particular hits a lot of cards because even if they only hit 4 lands, that's still a 10th of their deck right there. Not to mention the cards that they've drawn already and the cards that they played already. That's not bad. On top of that, you're probably going to hit a lot more than 4 cards because it's 4 lands, and it's very unlikely they just have straight up 4 lands in a row. Obviously that happens, it's random, you don't know what's going to happen exactly, but generally you can safe bet you're going to get at least more than 4 cards. And that's pretty good. A lot of times you can get really, really far through somebody's deck with a card like this. That's powerful. Now, obviously, mill is not necessarily the most popular strategy for limited gameplay just because it's a little bit hard to piece together. You don't really get all the tools for it most of the time, but this card in itself is the tool for mill. I mean, it's a really, really good one. Very, very powerful, and I think, honestly, I like it more than anything else. Personally, I just like mill, so this may be a very incorrect pick, but so far, I like Mind Funeral. Narcomoeba is a 1/1 for 1 and a blue. Has flying, and when if it's put into your graveyard from your library, you can put it straight up just onto the battlefield immediately. Good for self-mill strategies, very graveyard-focused strategies. A lot of times you'll see this in constructed with things like Dredge, where they're milling themselves, and this is just an absolute free creature. Free 1/1 flyer in particular. So it's actually pretty good for that, but it's not a very powerful card by any means, and limited in particular, it's not the best. So it's not something I'm interested in at all. Our rare here, ooh, bad one. Dragon Storm. So it's a sorcery for 8 and a red. Search your library for a dragon permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, and then you shuffle your library. It also has Storm, so you can copy it for every spell that was cast before it this turn. Storm, very, very powerful mechanic. This was actually part of some winning combos back in the day, but in Limited, it's really hard to actually pull out multiple dragons necessarily. You don't know what you're going to open. You may not see any dragons, in which case this card does stone dead nothing. So definitely going to pass on the rare, no doubt about that. We do have a foil here, Sylvan Bounty. Instant for 5 and a green. Target player gains 8 life, and then you can basic land cycle this for 1 and a green. So you pay that, discard this card, and then search your library for a land card, reveal it, and then put it into your hand. You then shuffle your library. Very, very good for fixing more than anything. Very rarely are you going to actually want that 8 life. However, if you're against a very aggro strategy, maybe side this in just so you can gain that 8 life. Not terrible, but in general, life gain is not the best strategy. Honestly, that was a bad pack of Modern Masters. I do not like that one, but we did get a Mind Funeral, and I do think that's my pick. I think there are safer picks. Things like Sudden Shock are much, much safer, and just generally speaking, probably very, very good in a lot of situations. Mind Funeral is just awesome, so I'm going to go with that one. Feel free to disagree, of course, in the comment section below. Happy to have that conversation, but if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like or a comment down below, and as always, please make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our awesome content. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next Crack-A-Pack episode.